got the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired, eyes on the case, breaking down the game and the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues. Takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder fight. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, smooth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Hoosier mind.
All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio and Gunfighter Beard Co. that helps great beards like my own, if you think I have a great beard anyway. But nonetheless, we're here to have a good time, and there's not a whole lot as far as off-season news for football, and that's kind of the really, really crappy part. Is there's not a whole lot to really go off of. So there is a little bit, though, as far as the NFL goes. There's not as much college football wise. A little, if you really want to consider more of the pre-draft stuff. There's a lot of people that are diving pretty deep into that. But again, that's kind of each to their own. I like doing kind of pre-mock drafts, but it's not always my thing. Nonetheless, though, I did want to talk about some of the things as far as the NFL news and whatnot that goes on. And one of the things that was brought up that I actually heard last week that I thought was interesting, and I haven't really heard much about it since, is that Deshaun Watson is apparently being pushed to be competitive in the Cleveland Browns camp, and that the owner, Jimmy Haslam, wants Deshaun Watson to be more considered in the mix for being the starting quarterback come week 1 for the Cleveland Browns. And that to me is just absolutely insane. And there's a multitude of reasons why, not just the allegations, not just his conduct off the field, but realistically, we have not seen a good Deshaun Watson since 2020, his last year starting with Houston. He had a career high in just about everything. Touchdowns, his yardage, his interception ratio, all of it was absolutely great. Obviously, the allegations happen. He sits out for a year. Then he comes to Cleveland in 2022. It's like, okay, maybe it's a little bit of Deshaun. You know, he only gets about 6 games in that. He goes 500 as a record. And okay, you know, maybe he'll get some rust knocked off. Then he continues on for Cleveland the following year. Not great. I mean, actually, it was pretty decent as far as their record and his statistics go. But overall, you know, we have not really seen Deshaun be the quarterback we thought he would be from 2018 to 2020. We just haven't seen that since being with Cleveland because of the injuries. And honestly, just everything that goes into being a franchise quarterback, he has just not met what a lot of people would consider the standard for that. And the fact that there's rumblings and there's arguments that Jimmy Haslam wants him to be the quarterback is absolutely insane to me. So I decided let's kind of look at all three of their quarterbacks that they at least have on their roster currently as it stands, barring any potential drafts, barring any potential free agency signings, anything like that. So let's look at Deshaun Watson's statistics the last time he played for Cleveland. So he didn't play at all last year. The last time he played for Cleveland was in 2024. He started 7 games. He went 1-6. He had about 63% completion percentage, just under 1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. Wasn't really much of a runner during that time either. So what little bit he did start for Cleveland in 2024, not great. If you go back the previous year in 2023, he started 6 games for him. He went 5-1. That's his best stretch with Cleveland so far. Little over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4 picks. And then his first year with Cleveland, again, only starting the last 6 games, 7 touchdowns, 5 picks, went 3-3. So overall with Cleveland so far, he's right at 500 or just under 500 of being right at 9-10. So that right there, not a great start. And the fact that they gave up 3 first-round picks for him to get him is absolutely crazy. The other thing that really kind of throws me off with this is they drafted 2 kids last year from Oregon with Dillon Gabriel and Shadeur Sanders out of Colorado. Gabriel, I really liked coming out of college. I really liked him at Oregon. I watched him at Oklahoma. I watched him at UCF. And then I watched him at Oregon. And I thought he did well. I thought he really came back from injury. I thought Oklahoma was kind of that first stepping stone for him of, all right, let's see what he's got. He did great with Oklahoma. And then Oklahoma decided that they wanted to move on to another direction. And so he said, okay, let me go to Oregon. Let me see if I can continue my talents and continue to elevate and see if I can go get a national championship. Let me go to a team that almost always has great weapons, can recruit well, does great in college football, especially within the last 10 to 15 years. Oregon has been pretty good. Let's see what they've got. And does great with them, wins the Big Ten championship. Does great, and they get bounced in the first round to the eventual national champions, Ohio State. So realistically, he had a great pedigree coming out of college into the NFL. Goes 3rd round to Cleveland, 94th overall pick. And what little bit he's gotten to play and start has not exactly been great. And I would really argue this for any young quarterback that comes into what I would consider a dumpster fire situation like Cleveland of we're going to throw him to the fire. We're going to see what happens. And honestly, kid, just good luck. And for Gabriel, that's not really his fault. They don't really have a lot of weapons. They don't have a lot of stuff for him to work with. And it's just, hey, we don't really have anything else to lose. Let's just see what we've gotten you. So he played 10 games. He started 6 of them. He went 1-5 as a starter for Cleveland. And he completed about 59.5% of his passes, threw for 900 yards, a little over 900 yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks. So pretty decent touchdown to pick ratio, and was sacked 19 times before he did eventually end up getting injured. And then Shadeur Sanders took over. And Shadeur, a little bit better if you want to consider the wins and his style of play. Dillon, I would consider more of your traditional passer, whereas Shadeur, you have a better chance of being more athletic, having more dynamic plays. Shadeur is going to take more risks. He's going to take bigger shots down the field. And for the most part, if you look at, again, what small sample size we have of him, Shadeur played 8 games. He started 7 because he basically started the second half of the season. He went 3-4 as a starter, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So not exactly great touchdown interception ratio, but it was kind of the same thing. You saw Shadeur really take a lot more shots. You saw him, really try to push the ball more down the field, give Cleveland a lot more big dynamic plays. it's just crazy that there's even a small consideration for Deshaun being the starter when you look at his sample size for the last 3 years. He's 9-10. He's thrown about little over 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 12 picks as Cleveland starter for the last 3 years, as compared to his first 4 with Houston. He was 28-25, threw for over 14,000 yards, 104 touchdowns, and 36 picks, as compared to the 2 kids that you spent 2 draft picks on, albeit they weren't high draft picks. They're still draft picks. Realistically, if you look at the 3rd round draft pick, those are typically guys that may get the chance to start. It just kind of depends what the situation is, what you're looking like as far as depth goes. Those are guys you typically, hey, you have a really good chance of being a starter in this league, or you have a really good chance of being able to be a star at one point if you really put your head down and grind. So it's crazy to me that Deshaun is the potential favorite. I'm going to be honest. This would be the most Cleveland Browns thing to do, to have Deshaun come back. And I know a lot of people may argue this, and I know even Cleveland would probably argue it, but they've paid him all this money. That's a Cleveland problem. They're the ones that decided to do that. They're the ones that decided to go all in on him. They're the ones that decided we're not only going to pay you, but I also heard something interesting with this before this whole entire trade went down, that apparently there was a multitude of teams that really wanted Deshaun Watson. And apparently 3 of them were the three NFC South teams, and the Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Saints. And Cleveland Browns weren't even on his radar, but those were some of the names of the teams that really, really wanted him. And realistically, he did have connections to almost all of them, with the exception of New Orleans. He didn't really have a connection to them as much, but coming out of the shadow of Drew Brees, the team still ran really well. You still had Sean Payton. There's still a lot of upside there in New Orleans. If he decides to come over to there, he could step into a really good situation. Now, albeit the cap is absolute hell, and I think a lot of Saint fans definitely know that, there is still a lot of better potential than going to Atlanta or going to Carolina. So then eventually it gets narrowed down. He wants either Atlanta or he wants New Orleans. He wants Atlanta because he's from Georgia. It'd be his hometown team. He'd still be really close to a lot of the Clemson fans. He'd be close to his family again. And obviously the Saints, it would be probably the best situation out of all 4 spots if he decided to go there. Cleveland decides, you know what? We think this is the guy. We think we have just enough talent right now. We're in a win now mode after to me, Cleveland did Baker really dirty. Like the guy wins you a playoff game. They had an electric offense that 2020 season. Deshaun's last season in Houston, they were absolutely electric. You know, they were winning big games. They win their first playoff game for the first time in like 20 years. And the next year following that, Baker gets hurt. He still continues to try to play like any other good quarterback, any other franchise quarterback is going to do, because they know the ship is going to quickly sink, and then they're going to go back to being Cleveland if they don't rectify this and if they don't do it right now. So Baker tries, they end up missing the playoffs. He's hurt. The relationship is completely fractured at that point because Cleveland is just absolutely throwing him under the bus. And to me, Baker didn't deserve that. Baker didn't deserve any of that. So now Cleveland realizes we have to go get a quarterback. And when they realize Deshaun doesn't even have Cleveland on his radar, that's when they decide, okay, here's what we'll do. Houston, we will give you a boatload of picks. Deshaun, we will sign you to a massive contract. We'll guarantee all your money if you decide to come here. And from the reports, everything that came out, the other teams were like, no, we're not even going to try to match that. Out of the teams, now looking into the future after the last couple of years of them doing it, I could see Atlanta maybe trying to make that deal of let's try to give him all the guaranteed money, especially with how the whole Kirk Cousins situation ended up. Still don't understand that. Maybe they try that route. New Orleans has been in too big of a cap hell for way too long. They were not going to have the money to be able to pay him all that guaranteed money, continue to pay the roster that they had, and even continue to pay Drew Brees long into his retirement. And so New Orleans probably going to be out. So Cleveland literally throws everything at them. And I guarantee if week one starts and Deshaun Watson is the starter, that's going to be some type of argument that people make. Well, they're paying him all this money. You're paying him all that money regardless, whether he starts or he doesn't. If I'm a general manager, if I'm looking at this realistically, why even entertain the thought of Deshaun? Like, and I get for Andrew Berry, who's the general manager of Cleveland, this is probably your last year. This is probably your very last shot. And truly realistically, if you look at what Cleveland was able to do, at least for a couple of years now, the last few, absolute crap show. Like it's not what I would do personally, but that's just me. Absolute crapshoot of the last couple of years, but you at least brought Cleveland back up for a little bit. They they did well into the playoffs. I think eventually Barry ran into just the conflicting issue of you have an overbearing owner that wants to make decisions. And honestly, too, as a general manager, you may not make the greatest decisions, like, fracturing the relationship with Baker. Like, yeah, don't throw your quarterback publicly under the bus. Like that's just me. Like, if there's an issue, you need to try to solve it in house. If not, trade him, get some type of draft capital back. Don't just like, I know they traded him to Carolina and they got a little bit for him because, again, Carolina's taking more of the risk of, well, let's see what he's got. Let's see what his injuries got. Looks like, we're not going anywhere, but we'll still take him just to see what happens. Maybe he can make magic happen here like he did in Cleveland. So it's not really Baker's fault. But to do that, and to me, again, it would just be the most Cleveland Browns thing to do. So if I wouldn't be surprised if they don't try to make him the week one starter. I think it's a mistake. He's 30 years old. There's all the off the field misconduct issues. Now, obviously, a lot of these are allegations. There was some settlements and whatnot that have come through, but there's already history. There's already a pattern. Now, whether or not he did or didn't do it, I'm not going to sit here and say whether he did or didn't. But the fact that you have those speculations, you had all the legal battles, you were suspended, you were punished, all of that coming into play with everything that happened. If I'm a GM, like, are you really even worth that risk anymore? We're already paying you the money. That's already lost, but we've got two guys that we don't have to pay as much money to. In the two guys that we drafted last year as rookies, now they're coming into their technically second year of their contracts. We still potentially have them for at least another 2 years. Why not ride with the young bucks? Why even sit there and try to entertain riding with Deshaun Watson? Personally, I wouldn't do it. You saw a little bit of sample size from Dillon Gabriel. You saw a little bit of a sample size from Shadeur Sanders. Have them do a quarterback battle. Now, obviously, it has been Cleveland's moneymaker because that's what everybody has talked about. It's what everybody has been into the entire offseason last year and even beginning into this year because they, mentioned Deshaun Watson's name. Like, he might be, we want him to compete. We want him to be in there. It kind of reminds me of like WWE with Vince McMahon. There's, Jimmy Haslam is just the Vince McMahon. Like, no, damn it, I want him in there. Why? Why do you want him to compete? Oh, we pay him all this money. Don't do it. Don't do it, Jimmy. Don't do it. So it'll be interesting to see how this ends up turning out, where this ends up going. Like I said, if I'm Cleveland, why even make the entertainment? Why? Like, it's not worth it. He's not going to really be he's not going to give you anything productive. He might, but again, he's been out for over a year, coming off of injury. It's a new coach. It's a completely new system. Yes, he has more of the experience factor, which somebody made the argument of, well, he's got all this in-game experience. He's got all this NFL experience. I can make the counter argument right now as it stands. Shadeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel has more recent experience in the NFL than Deshaun Watson does throughout his career. They have more recent experience than he does. That would be my biggest argument. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that he maybe couldn't pick apart a defense better than they can. He probably could. He's been around the game a little bit longer. But as far as recent experience, as far as being in tune with guys, building the chemistry with guys, no, there is no competition. There is no competing. Absolutely don't see it. But that's just me. And then this might be a little bit of a short show, but we are going to talk real quick about a college prospect that's coming out in the NFL. And we don't know where he's going to end up. We don't know if he's going to be a first round pick. We don't know if he's going to be a later, like a second day pick. More than likely, he's going to be a second day pick. But that's Alabama's Ty Simpson. And I have seen so many predictions. I've seen so many different places where he could potentially end up. Pete Schrager of ESPN actually mentioned a lot of mock drafts have him in the first round. According to Pete Schrager, he has him actually leaving about the second or third round, depending on who some of the teams are. Now, one thing we maybe could see is a team trading back up into the first, maybe in the later rounds, to potentially get him, just so that way they have the 5th-year option under their belt if they decide that he's going to be their guy. And that could really be anybody. It could be anybody from the Jets. It could be anybody from the Cardinals. There's a multitude of teams that are kind of currently sitting there in need of a quarterback. Honestly, I could maybe even make the argument that maybe we see Miami make that. Obviously, they paid Malik Willis all this money. I think Malik Willis is going to be their guy. He's young enough. I think Malik Willis has definitely earned his shot to at least try to be a franchise quarterback again. One of the other teams I've seen a lot say that they might spend a first-round pick on him is Pittsburgh. And to me, I don't think he's first-round talent worthy. But that's just me. I don't see Ty Simpson as first-round talent coming into the draft. And realistically, I don't even see it for a team like Pittsburgh, who is a little bit more well-ran. He would be coming in with as much as a lot of people would probably argue and not be as big a fan, he's coming into Mike McCarthy, who, while I'm not going to sit here and say Mike McCarthy is the reason Rodgers was successful, he definitely had a hand in it. But I'm not going to sit here and say that he would be in the best situation if he was going to Pittsburgh. Joy! I appreciate you turning in, Joy. How are you? I've missed you. I always feel bad because I'm like, I hope Joey tunes in. I know I don't always post this like super scheduled early because I'll be honest, some of the times I'm creating this just before the show starts because I'm also trying to think of what I want to talk about, especially in the off season. But I appreciate you being here, Joy. But with Ty Simpson to Pittsburgh, that might be his best situation. That might be his best spot out of all the teams that might potentially go after him. If I'm Pittsburgh, do you really want to spend a first-round pick on him when you have so many other needs that have to be addressed? You've got the offensive line that's going to need to be addressed. Running back wise is a little bit of a question mark. Yes, you have DK Metcalf, but do you want to get another wide receiver to pair with him? And then after that, your biggest need is quarterback. Now, a lot of people might argue, well, they have first-round pick. Why don't they spend it on a quarterback? How many times have we seen teams spend a first-round pick on a quarterback and it not end up working out well for them? I.e. the Jets, Zach Wilson, i.e. the 49ers, Trey Lance. Just because you spend a first-round pick on them does not necessarily mean they're going to turn out and pan out well for you and your team as a whole. So I personally would not recommend it if it was me. I know it's a glaring need. And this will probably be talked about for many, many more months, probably even on this show, as much as I hate to admit it, is Rodgers going to retire? Is he not? Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? Everything that ties in with that. So for me, if I'm Pittsburgh, do not spend the first-round pick on him. Don't do it. I don't care if he's young. I don't care if there's a lot of upside. If I'm Pittsburgh, you have so many other needs that can be addressed. And I would make the argument too. You've got one of two things that could potentially happen. You could either make the trade for somebody, just see what you get. Um, Eventually, there's going to be somebody that walks away from their quarterback that's probably going to be a bit of a surprise. Now, who that is exactly, we don't know. It could be one of those. Maybe next year Dallas gives up on Dak, and he's like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get rid of you, Dak. We're going to trade you to Pittsburgh. You will go back with Mike McCarthy. And again, maybe you try to kick the tires with another old quarterback as kind of a transitional thing. Um, maybe you try to go after somebody like Daniel Jones. Maybe there is a little bit of a career revival for a quarterback that goes somewhere else of like Malik Willis of, okay, let's see what we got. Let's see what can happen. I think one name that, again, I'm not going to sit here and say that it would for sure work. I don't even know how well this would. This is just one that popped into my head randomly. I kind of wonder what would Carson Wentz look like on the Steelers, even if it's just as a bridge quarterback, right? I'm not gonna sit here and say Carson is the franchise guy. I'm not gonna sit here and say he's the solution by no stretch of the imagination. He's been in the league 10 years, he's bounced around a lot, he's been hurt quite a lot. Not gonna say that he would be the savior of Pittsburgh by no stretch of the imagination. But he is a bit younger than what some of the other guys would be. Maybe he's the bridge. He looked good for Minnesota. Maybe he could be the bridge for Pittsburgh too. Now, obviously, they also have Will Howard from Ohio State, who was on the roster last year. He just didn't get to play, partly due to injury. They still have Mason Rudolph, who I know Mason Rudolph got the opportunity to start the year before with the Titans, but again, not exactly set up in the greatest situations for that. Like, do you really think that that's gonna do much or help anything? Probably not. Um, so I do think that there are other opportunities for Pittsburgh, whether it be in free agency, and who knows, maybe if you're Pittsburgh, you know, e- even if Mike McCarthy's first season is bad, if even if he has the first losing season for Pittsburgh in years, following following after Mike Tomlin, who never had a losing season as the head coach, even if they do, that could potentially put you in a really good spot for another decent quarterback in a significantly better draft class next year. And that's the thing I think people need to realize that is kind of hard sometimes as fans. And I think fan bases who they know what it's like to suffer for a really long time. Pittsburgh definitely knows its struggles as far as, they don't make it out of the first round of the playoffs. They don't really go very far. The quarterback situation has been a problem ever since Ben Roethlisberger. Kenny Pickett obviously wasn't the guy. Um, all of that entail. I think truly for some of these franchises, yeah, you're going to have a couple rough years, but if you can get to that point, build up the roster, build up the youth, build up everything, and then you get that guy, it's going to make a whirlwind of difference. And truly, next year, potentially with some of the guys that are going to be coming out, you're going to have somebody. I don't know if they'd be bad enough to be first overall. Um, you know, Arch Manning would potentially be available. DJ Lagway, maybe he comes out of Baylor. Maybe he stays another year. Who knows? So you've got Arch Manning, you've got DJ Lagway. I don't know how many people would consider him NFL talent, but realistically, you could maybe argue Sam Levitt out of LSU would potentially be coming out. Julian Sayin could potentially come out next year as well. Again, just depending on how he feels, depending on how his camp feels. So there's a lot of pieces you could potentially work with as far as guys coming out of college and maybe hitting on a franchise quarterback. And truly, I think next year's class would be significantly better than this year's. Like, I know a lot of people kind of up and down feelings about Fernando Mendoza, whether or not did he deserve the Heisman compared to guys in the past who numbers wise and statistically had significantly better seasons. And you can make a debate for that pretty much anytime you want. I feel it's the same way with Cam Ward last year. Cam Ward last year was the best quarterback in that draft class. Was he like number one overall? Again, You can kind of make that argument. I think he was good. I think for the class that he was in, I think for the team like the Titans, who they desperately needed a quarterback, he was absolutely the guy that was needed to have that happen. I think if you put him in any other draft classes, I think he would still be top 5. I don't know if he would be number 1. This year, you've got Carson Beck, you've got Fernando Mendoza, you've got Joey Aguilar out of Tennessee, you've got Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU, you've got Joy, exactly. Go Tigers, go Saints. And I feel bad for Nussmeier after hearing a lot of the interviews with some former players about how that whole situation went down with him, with Brian Kelly, how apparently he came into the season, he was just not healthy. I don't know what happened with that. But I do feel bad for Nussmeier, although there is something I heard that I feel bad for him, but it's also one of those I kind of get a little frustrated with him more than anything. I heard that his last year, that would have been his second full year starting, he didn't really seem to take the wanting steps forward of trying to be better. Apparently, there's some type of simulation system that they have down at LSU that Joe Burrow used that apparently helped his growth. It was a night and day difference. Jaden Daniels ended up hearing about it. That's why he came to LSU to play, because he heard about it. He was extremely fascinated by it. We saw how well Jaden Daniels did for his 2 years down there at LSU, and did absolutely fantastic. And it paid off, as they were both first round picks. And it just seemed like Nuss didn't want to do that. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe felt it didn't work. I don't know if he just didn't have the motivation. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and speculate, but it's really hard for me to feel bad if that is the case. It's like, dude, the formula's there. Like, whatever that is seems to work. And maybe it just didn't work for him if he did try it. I don't know. But it makes me question a lot of things. But there's some guys that I think did well in college that maybe it correlates over. I don't know. Bo Perbula, he's another one, unless they try to give him an injury waiver. I don't think they will. You've got Ty Simpson out of Alabama. So there's so many guys that played well last year in college. I don't necessarily think translate over to the NFL talent. I think Mendoza out of this class is probably the best and the closest. But we'll have to see when it comes time for training camp, when it comes time to preseason and the regular season, how he does with the Raiders. With Tom Brady's influence, the Raiders are doing just about everything right that you could ask for. To me, the wide receiver room could still use a little bit of work, but they have 2 great tight ends, Brock Bowers, Brett Mayer. So, I mean, or Michael Mayer, one of the two. Mayer, I know is the last name. So I think the potential's there, but we'll have to wait and see. But appreciate everybody tuning in. I know this is a little bit of a shorter episode. Not a whole lot of super in-depth stuff to talk about. Again, we're kind of in that weird dry spell right before the draft. The draft will happen. We'll have a little bit to talk about. We'll kind of go into the offseason a little bit as stuff happens. Then training camp, spring camps, whatnot will happen. But I do still plan on doing the college football for dummies series. I'm probably going to wait till after the draft to do that. Because then we'll really be deep into the off season, because we're waiting until preseason football to happen before it really starts to come back. But appreciate everybody tuning in. If you like my content, if you want to learn more, if you want to dive deeper into college football and everything associated with it, definitely check me out at Inside the Hoosier Mind. If you want to hear more about our military hosts and other podcasters that do great work, that they have so many other stories, more entertaining than me for sure. Definitely check out Military Broadcast Radio on all the social media sites, on Facebook, TikTok. You can even go to mbradio.us. It has a bio about Military Broadcast Radio, all the hosts. And check out Gunfighter Beard Co. Great beard products. He has great stuff. It smells great. It lasts a long time. Makes your beard look pretty, smell good. All of the above. And hopefully next week we'll also be back, because I'm going to do a potential sit-down interview with Mike Hughes, the Shy Kid, and how he came to be, where his journey started, and where he is now. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Joy, I love you. Have a great night yourself, and we will see y'all later.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, We want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.